Good morning, everyone. Happy morning, yay. I think everyone's so happy to be together. You're just chatting and hugging, and it's human contact time, right? That's amazing. So thank you for being here today. My name's Yvonne Myers, and I'm the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at the Fort Collins Area Chamber of Commerce. Yay! I've been there almost 90 days now, and I've stopped saying Columbine Health System. So yay, my new role and my new job. So we appreciate you being here. I do have to tell you that every single conversation I've had over the last 90 days with all of our businesses that I've talked to and all the board members of the chamber, childcare comes up 100% of the time. So between childcare and housing. So this is an important topic today. We know that you're here because you believe this is an important topic too and want some information, some answers. So welcome to this event of Actionable Ways to Create a Family-Friendly Workplace. Our sponsors are pleased to have you here today, and they are the Bohemian Foundation, EPIC, Executives Partnering to Invest in Children, Early Childhood Council of Larimer County, and the Fort Collins Area Chamber of Commerce. Family-friendly workplaces, best practices. What does that mean? Since coming to the chamber, as I've told you, every business has lifted up childcare as a need and an opportunity. They find that the cost of childcare and the availability is affecting their ability to hire and keep the workforce and talent that they need. The workforce shortages across all industries require employers to rethink their company culture, including flexibility, especially for those raising children and possibly dealing with elder care at the same time. This is our topic for today. You will hear from experts to explain things like flex benefits, culture shifts, tapping into federal tax supports. And then we have a panel of community leaders who will discuss their journey thus far into becoming a family-friendly employer. We hope you will learn tangible ways to make your workplace friendly to the employees that you have to help the employees to be better, to be at work, to be productive, and to feel valued. And that their children are safe, being cared for, and learning to be our future workforce. Let me now introduce to you two of our experts, Nicole Reel from EPIC, which is the Executives Partnering to Invest in Children, and Christina Taylor from the Early Childhood Council of Larimer County.
Good morning. I'm Christina Taylor, CEO of the Early Childhood Council of Larimer County. Nicole's going to hang out because she's taking over right after me. So, Nicole Reel from EPIC. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I'm just going to frame the issue. I know most of you are probably well aware, and then hand it off to the expert on the family-friendly environments in particular. So let's get going. So first off, a lot of people wonder what the heck an Early Childhood Council is, and I'm not going to waste an opportunity to tell you. So an Early Childhood Council, we're an independent 501c3, and we're part of a comprehensive system of early childhood. We were established via state statute, so there are 34 early childhood councils throughout the state that are focused on supporting the early childhood system as a whole. Our focus really is on access and affordability of childcare, the health and mental health of children, and we do have a strong focus on advocacy and policy and how that impacts the early childhood system. So this one I know a lot of you are probably acutely aware of, right? Families in Larimer County spend an average of $12,000 a year on one child for childcare. That can be as high as $16,000 to $20,000 a year for an infant, as infant care tends to be more expensive. There's also a 40% shortage in childcare access for families with preschoolers, and a 75% shortage in access for families with infants. Again, infant care is harder to come by because it's very specialized. So families that are, or employees that are immediately postpartum that are trying to find care for their infant struggle significantly because there just aren't enough spots. And then the last one, which I find so shocking, is that 37% of a family's income can be spent on childcare in a year. This is for an average family of 4 that's making the household median income as defined by, or at $64,919 a year. So 37% of their income, which is significant. Really quickly, why does early childhood matter? This is our bread and butter, but I want to make sure that others understand that first 5 years of a child's life really sets the basis for their lifelong health and well-being. Children form more than 1 million neural connections every minute in their first 5 years, and their quality caregiving environments are incredibly important to ensure that 20 years, 30 years down the road, we have a healthy, viable workforce and a healthy economy and society. So it's super important that children have quality care. It also decreases healthcare costs, unemployment costs, crime rates, and it increases lifetime learning. So children that have access to really quality environments from 0 to 5, these are the outcomes that we can see through many, many years of evidence. Nicole's going to talk mostly about this, but 10% of Colorado residents quit or don't take a job because of childcare issues. That's 10% of your potential workforce. And families in Larimer County reduced their workload by 42% due to lack of childcare in the last couple of years. I want to say the last year, but the pandemic is dragging on. Lack of access to early care and education for families leads to increased work absences and removes talented employees from the workforce. And in the last year alone, more than 20 million women have left the workforce. That was actually 2021. In 2008, United Way and the Coloradan did a study on economic self-sufficiency and found that childcare access was the single greatest deterrent to economic self-sufficiency for families in our county. Very quickly, I'll explain why this is such an issue. A lot of folks wonder why childcare providers or why there's such a shortage, rather, and really it's focused on the workforce. Childcare providers charge, the majority of their income, their revenue comes from family fees. And as I just said a couple slides ago, those family fees are already too high to access childcare for many, many families. But it also means that they can't pay living wage to their staff. So our early educators that are very highly qualified, educated, understand early childhood development are often making between $13 and $15 an hour. And it's because the programs can't raise tuition to pay their staff more because then families couldn't afford it. So it is a classic market failure. There are several options for families. I won't go into these too much, but for those of you that are employers, these are important resources to know about for your employees. Colorado Child Care Assistance Program is for those with the lowest income. The United Way Scholarship Fund, which just launched this month, fills the gap between families that can't afford or that don't qualify for CCAP but still can't afford care. There's sliding scales and scholarships, but at very few programs around town or around the county. Colorado Preschool Program, again, really targeted at our lowest income families. Head Start, and then Universal Pre-K, which I think Nicole's going to talk more about that, so I won't go into it. And then last resource I want to make sure that you all know about is Larimer Child Care Connect. We launched this in 2020 in the height of the pandemic to ensure that families could access real-time supply and demand. So if they needed to find care, they could get into Larimer Child Care Connect, find options for their care based on their commute, based on where they live, and find real-time openings to cut down on the 75 to 300 programs that they might need to call to access a slot. So that's all I've got for you. I sped through it because Nicole's is what you're all here for. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Christina. I have to say, Larimer County has an amazing early childhood council, so kudos to you and your team for the work you do. Thank you. You also have a fantastic Chamber of Commerce up here, and in fact, I was actually on the phone yesterday with someone from the National Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and they said, oh, I have a friend in Fort Collins, and they said that the Fort Collins Chamber is one of the best in the country, and I was like, oh, cool. Okay, well, I'll let them know. I'm going to be there tomorrow morning. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Nicole Reel. I get the honor and privilege of serving as president and CEO at EPIC, Executives Partnering to Invest in Children. A little bit about us. We are a 13-year-old nonprofit organization here in Colorado, founded by a group of business leaders and CEOs who felt like there needed to be an organization that could serve as the business community's voice in support of early childhood investments and policy issues. And we really have kind of a twofold mission. We want to make sure that we're building a great workforce for the future. We know, of course, that brain development is incredibly important to the future workforce that we need to build here in Colorado. But we also know that it's critical to make sure that our families, the workforce, the talent that we want to attract and retain in our state has the early childhood supports they need, including childcare. So we work on a lot of policy work. We work with employers directly here in Colorado to help them think about solutions for their workforce. And we also work with communities on infrastructure projects and thinking about things like facilities and workforce as well. So lots of fun work. This is my little daughter back when she was little and not screaming at me for more iPad time in the morning. Now she's 8. But she was really cute and just loved me to death back then, so. Awesome. Okay. Well, some of you have seen these charts, but wanted to make sure we grounded ourselves in some data. So, of course, first off, you can see here compared to Larimer County is our purple line here. We've got Colorado and the United States as our other trend lines. And you can see, of course, that Larimer County has been growing and continues to grow in Colorado. In fact, projections are showing us that Fort Collins, specifically in the Loveland area, are going to be tremendously successful and popular areas for families to move to in the future. So lots of population growth in this area. We also, of course, have really high workforce participation rates here, and this tends to have a direct correlation with the cost of living wherever you're looking at in Colorado. So where you see higher real estate costs, where you see higher costs of living, you also tend to see higher workforce participation rates, which really just indicates that there's an economic imperative in households that you really do have to have all of the available working parents in the workforce in order to afford to live there and make that work. So here in Larimer County, you're roughly around 67, I think I saw maybe on Larimer County's website, closer to 69% now. And of course, we have these two forces that are pushing and pulling against each other. So on one hand, we have a booming population. Colorado is still seeing a huge amount of influx of people moving to our state, but especially this area up in Larimer County. We, of course, have job growth, which is great. We all want job growth in our local economies. And we've got industry growth. We have great diversification of industries here in Colorado as well. So all those things are great. They're attracting workforce. They're making this a great place to live, work, and move to. On the other hand, unfortunately, like Christina said, we have childcare access and affordability on the decline in Colorado, meaning it has become less feasible for childcare businesses to operate and stay open. It has become more expensive for families. And unfortunately, we have lost thousands of slots of care, especially in family childcare homes. So we've seen a lot of those close over the past decade, even though we've added about 700,000 people to our state overall. All right, a couple more statistics here. So the one on the right, small font, but I'll give you the highline summary here. The Pew Research Institute just released a new study a couple weeks ago. They surveyed all of the parents and the workers that they could find who had left their jobs recently and asked them why they had left their jobs. So I think not surprisingly, number one is pay. So of course wages are important and closely tied to a livable wage and parents being able to, or workers in general, being able to stay where they're at. Second was no opportunities for advancement. Third was feeling disrespected at work. And fourth was childcare issues. So very high on the list. I think we've seen those top three are pretty common, but certainly childcare has risen on the list of reasons as to why individuals are either remaining unemployed, are underemployed, or are leaving the workforce. In addition, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation has been doing quite a bit of research and work on this over the past couple of years, especially with the pandemic hitting. And they have also found that 50% of parents were reporting that they hadn't returned to work because of childcare. 1 in 5 parents were really unsure about their childcare situations once COVID kind of subsided and they saw the effects of the pandemic going away. 16% of employers were reporting that they had employees leaving for childcare reasons. And of course, 11% of working parents reported they had actually turned down a position due to childcare, which ties closely to that statistic that Christina shared as well. All right, a couple other stats here. We have 16% of our US workforce, about 26 million people dependent on childcare. In Colorado, we have a very young state, so we're actually closer to about 20% here. This is not a small subset of our workforce by any means. We also know that among those who had stopped looking for work, childcare was twice as likely to be cited as an issue by women. That was from a McKinsey study that recently came out. And we also know that only 39% of respondents with household incomes below $50,000, this is nationally reported, that they could actually afford childcare. This is also likely to be a much lower percentage here in Colorado, given our cost. And when we look at the national numbers, as far as how many families are making career sacrifices of some sort because of childcare, it's over 45,000 parents here in Colorado. That's a really big talent pipeline. Where are those workers? Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about was, of course, women in the workforce, because we have seen this she-cession that has occurred over the pandemic. We saw this huge wave of women specifically, and I think also specifically women of color, who left the workforce as a result of this pandemic. Now, certainly there were some industries that were hit harder than others, hospitality, tourism, areas like that, that were also predominantly or had higher percentages of women employed in them, but it was still very disproportionate to the amount of people or women that we saw in those industries. So I wanted to show this graph because I think people thought that, women in the workforce was on the upswing really up until the pandemic hit. But when we look at this is a chart that the Fed recently released. When they look at this in comparison to the other highly economic developed countries in the world, the US and women's participation in the workforce specifically has actually been on the decline since about 2000. And when we look at other countries that have actually continued to incline on the women's workforce participation rate, we can also notice, and this is simply a correlation, this is not a causation, that Canada and France and United Kingdom and countries like that also happen to have either fully subsidized or partially subsidized childcare and early education for families. Also on the women in the workforce rate, I also wanted to mention as well that at least at this point in time, we're about 3 decades behind where we were in terms of women in the workforce. We still haven't recovered all of our women who left the workforce. But I also wanted to note that the US in particular actually has had a declining birth rate for a number of years. And so we're actually now at the point in our country where we're actually not replacing our population at the rate that we need to. And the reason I point that out is because it's becoming an even more important economic imperative that women are in fact able to enter and remain in the workforce. Because really our growth, our economy, and so much of what we want to achieve in the business community moving forward will be dependent on making sure women can enter and remain in the workforce. Okay, and now we're going to talk about what this is costing your local community. So we have a study done by the Council for a Strong America. This was actually a study completed and released in March of 2020. So these numbers are a little bit outdated, but I think most importantly are probably underestimated because unfortunately we know that the pandemic has had a negative effect on the childcare industry, and we unfortunately have lost access and slots in businesses as a result of the pandemic. But back then, they estimated that there was a $2.2 billion economic cost to Colorado because of the lack of infant and toddler childcare. And when we boil that down and look at that Larimer County specifically based on GDP for Larimer County in comparison to Colorado, that is a $99 million economic cost to Larimer County alone. When we look at that cost for employers, it was $680 million for employers across Colorado. Again, when we proportionally look at that for Larimer County, it's $31 million for employers. And when we look at that opportunity cost, assuming that every job has a $110,000 a year economic contribution to the local economy, that is an opportunity cost of over 900 jobs per year, simply because parents do not have sufficient access to infant and toddler care. Okay, so lots of depressing data, I know. That feels like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? But employers have a lot of options and ways that they can take action. So we're gonna talk about that today as well. So this graphic is from the US Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Once again, wanna give them full credit for the work they're doing here and these graphics that they help create for us. So first, we're going to talk about quick wins. These are very kind of low-cost policy, procedure, and cultural changes that employers can start to make sure that they're accommodating families and they're really trying to think about how to meet the needs of families that are struggling with access and affordability to childcare, and all of the challenges that might come with having childcare or elder care as responsibilities in their life. Secondly, we're going to talk about internal investments. This is where we start to really put dollar signs to the work behind early care and education. And yes, it's an investment. It does come back to employers and companies and communities in different ways. And third, we're going to talk about community investments and ways that business leaders and the private sector can really use their voice and influence to support this topic. Okay. I'm sure everyone has heard this phrase on the left, culture eats strategy for breakfast. It has never been more true than today. So culture is top of mind for many employees now. We're certainly seeing that people are starting to reassess where they want to work, how they want to work, who they want to work for, and culture and different types of benefits that maybe they haven't had access to before are coming to mind as they're making those decisions. So first off, let's talk about how employers can really think about how to help their employees. In the U.S. Chamber of Commerce study that they did with chambers and employers across the country, they asked two questions. They said, number one, do you feel like you understand the childcare challenges of your workforce? And 75% of companies said, yes, we feel like we understand those challenges and what they are. And then they said, how do you ask about those challenges? And only 13% of employers actually said that they have some sort of feedback mechanism for employees to provide that feedback to them. And I think why that's important is because we know that from talking to employees and families who are struggling with this issue, they have told them in many studies that they are not entirely truthful or forthcoming with their challenges around childcare when they're talking to their immediate supervisors. Some people will be, and certainly I think that information gets fed up through the chain or, comes to the higher level or the business owner around what those challenges are. But there are many, many workers, many families who will never say a thing. And they won't say something because they're concerned about not getting that promotion, not getting that opportunity, not being seen as a team player. They really don't want to talk to their immediate supervisors about the fact that it's a huge challenge for them to make sure their child gets picked up at 4 p.m. every day and they have a safe place for that child to be. It's a huge challenge for them to talk about the fact that they don't have a caregiver for their infant on Tuesdays, and they're trying to cobble together 3 or 4 different people to watch their baby so they can show up to work. So, number one, if you're an employer, if you have an organization to take care of, please ask your employees about this. And ideally, something that is anonymous and blinded so that people feel like they can be honest with their feedback. Second, check your training and your norms. So number one, CEOs, leaders of organizations, this is largely on your shoulders to really model what a family-friendly environment is. We want employees to make sure that they feel like the leaders at the top of the organization truly understand and honor family-friendly practices. And there's really no better way to do that than to model it. And we understand certainly that some environments are not appropriate to have children in. Certainly you can't be walking around a hospital with your child or a young one in tow. But certainly if you can model that, or, I think oftentimes during the pandemic we saw children running through background Zoom calls, right? And I think that has become much more normalized now, but as much as leaders can vocally share that they're supportive of family-friendly policies and make sure that starts to set the tone culturally for the organization, it will make a huge difference. And secondly, you need to make sure that all of your training and your policies and procedures are following that. So as an example, you could have a CEO in the leadership of an organization saying, yes, we want to be family friendly. We want to honor flexibility for our employees. If you need to go pick up your kid and split up your day, we'll let you do that, right? If you need to trade a shift with someone so you can deal with childcare, we'll let you do that. But if your training expectations and if your annual performance reviews do not set those clear expectations for direct supervisors and managers, that is a huge opportunity for that to go way off the rails. And I say that because, of course, every supervisor is different, every manager is different, everyone has different biases, right? They maybe never had a child and they don't understand, why they have to give one employee flexibility and not the other. So it's important for the company to make sure, or the employer to make sure that in those trainings, in those performance reviews, in those policies and procedures, that those are visible to the managers, that people are trained on that, what that expectation looks like. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like here. I actually have a friend who's a single mom. She has a son who has been, virtual learning in school, virtual learning in school, right, back and forth. It's been super fun for those of us with young elementary schoolers the past couple of years. And so she has been, trying to do her job to the best she can, right? She had to log on to Zoom every morning, make sure her son was in class, try to run back to her desk, do her job, keep her job so she could actually afford to pay her mortgage and keep her home. And when it came time for her annual performance review, of course, the company had said, oh, we're letting everyone work remotely. People can be flexible, no big deal. Well, her direct supervisor said, we have our huddles every morning or, twice a week at 9 a.m. and you really weren't there very often, so you missed a lot of the team discussions. We just really didn't feel like you were kind of part of the team, like your coworkers were there, but you weren't. And so unfortunately, she didn't get a raise. And she feels like, this is very unfair. My son starts school at 9 a.m. That's when I had to get him on Zoom calls. That's when I was trying to run around the house and do everything. And so here, I think the dichotomy here is to think about how do you create flexibility and also consistency for employees. It's really important that they know when and how things are happening, but also can managers work with teams to say, hey, if 9 a.m. is a really bad time, can we move our huddle to 9:30? Can we move it to 8:30? What kind of accommodations can we make to make sure that's in place? And then just make sure that, of course, if you can, flexibility, job sharing, split shifts. Maybe you can split a job into 2 roles and have 2 part-time workers as opposed to 1 full-time worker. Might create a little bit more paperwork, a little bit more logistics for you as a business owner or for you as an employer. But at the end of the day, you might be able to benefit from actually having 2 individuals who aren't quite ready to go back into the workforce full-time but can work part-time. And of course, think about the fact that sometimes people can't even interview if they don't have childcare. So how can you accommodate that when you're actually interviewing people and looking for new employees, because they might have an infant at home that they don't have childcare for. They might have something in the way of actually showing up to an interview. Okay, we're going to talk about internal investments now and what you can do in this area. So first off, help employees find childcare. I think Larimer County is definitely a leader in the state. They've created this new Larimer County Connect website where families can find childcare. Just posting that information, making sure your team and your employees are aware of those resources. A really great step you can take to make sure they have that support. You can think, of course, of backup care or elder care. I will put a caution in here that backup care is great if you have sufficient supply of caregivers or programs, which unfortunately most of our state doesn't. So sometimes, offering backup care, I think, is a nice benefit to have if parents actually have backup caregivers and programs they can tap into. But unfortunately, oftentimes in Colorado, that is not something we have the luxury of. You can also, of course, look at just offering a straight stipend for childcare. So that could just be, a stipend that they take towards any childcare of their choice, and actually just helping them pay for the cost of childcare, which could go a long way for a family and be a huge help. Of course, there are dependent care savings accounts, which come with a payroll tax savings for employers. So you do have some payroll tax savings that you realize in the dependent care savings accounts. Of course, there's a tax benefit for the employees as well. The one thing here to think about is that, of course, it can only be used with licensed and formal caregivers, meaning, they'll have to have some sort of EIN reported in order for those families to take advantage of that. And oftentimes families are using, family members, friends, neighbors, sometimes a combination thereof. And so they may not necessarily be able to use that dependent care savings account and actually use it on the caregiver of their choice. Of course, we have paid family leave, and Colorado did pass a paid family leave bill a couple years ago on the ballot that will start to be implemented next year. So we will have a paid family leave insurance program in Colorado starting next year. The details of which are still emerging, but I think there's a little bit of light at the end of that tunnel here when it comes to thinking about how we can support families who want to take paid leave. We also have some employers who can bring non-mobile infants to work. Again, not all environments are going to be conducive to this, but if that's something your business, your workforce, and your environment can honor, definitely something to think about. And of course, thinking about things like 529 college savings plans, and of course, also things like community discounts or stipends, like I mentioned, that you can give to employees as well. We also have the option of on-site or near-site childcare facilities, which can be a game changer for employers, for sure. This is actually where I started my career. There was a company called Storage Tech in Louisville, Colorado that had on-site childcare for their employees, and I was an early childhood teacher at their program. And I saw firsthand the benefit of that program, how it helped them recruit people from really all over the world to come work for Storage Tech, how well it kept parents and workers there, how engaged the families were. I started with infants and worked all the way through preschoolers before they went to kindergarten. I'm still friends on Facebook with all the parents and children. I think the bonds that we developed in that program were very, very special because those parents just had a different type of relationship there with on-site childcare. But definitely for those employers that have large on-site workforce populations where people need to come to one location, they need to show up to work and be there, be present, make sure they have high quality, affordable care for their children, on-site or near-site childcare can definitely be a great option. It's convenient, it does increase productivity. We have a number of studies that show that. And of course, it really helps, I think, with this whole new post-pandemic world and workplace design that a lot of employees are looking for. We also now have an employer-based childcare grant program here in Colorado. It was created through legislation last year. It's currently funded with $8.8 million, and we'll actually have a legislative bill introduced probably today that will refund it with $10 million. It provides employers with grants of up to $800,000. There's a 50% matching requirement for for-profit entities and a 25% match for nonprofit and governmental entities, and it allows them to receive a grant towards the capital construction costs of on-site or near-site childcare. And I will tell you that there are a number of employers now looking at this option. Epic has the privilege of working with a number of them. We actually created a design lab this past year with employers to help 10 employers around the state develop business plans and look at how to do this. So we've got projects all over the state. We have a hospital in Grand Junction building on-site childcare, food hall in Pueblo, long-term care facility in Sterling, all sorts of different business models, Steamboat Ski Resort. So lots of different employers stepping up and creating childcare for their communities. And sometimes they're doing that in partnership with other employers. And many of them are also opening those facilities to community members. And then, of course, we have a lot of myth busting to do around risk for childcare. Certainly, there is risk in childcare like any other business. Most of our employers are solving that issue by making sure they have really strong governance agreements and contracting agreements in place, and they are working with experienced, high-quality early care and education providers who know what they're doing and can do it well. And of course, they can share those costs with other business leaders, other employers in the area, and also have a long-term return on investment. So Patagonia has been doing on-site childcare for quite some time in 2 of their locations, and they estimate that between tax credits that they receive back from the federal government, there are some state tax credits too here in Colorado, and of course the return on investment they have with retention, employee engagement, and other areas like that, they only have about 20% of their cost that goes unrecuperated. Okay, so employer advocacy and community investments. And this is, I think, where we'll have some more discussion. But number one, I think conversation is about, are these equal job benefits or are these equitable job benefits? And I think this is a really big conversation happening right now in organizations with employers. We have a lot of employers who say, well, you know, we can't offer a benefit unless everyone can use it. But I can tell you that you have a very large talent pipeline out there right now that employers are not able to access, not able to retain, not able to promote, not able to recruit because of the lack of childcare. And so this is really about equity. A lot of those parents, especially if you have single parents who are trying to manage this themselves, these are individuals that have everything stacked against them in order to be promoted into that next level position, in order to have the opportunity that they want to have, that so many other workers have sometimes. So childcare is oftentimes thinking about what is equitable in terms of benefits versus what is equal. We also, of course, want employers to advocate for this issue, whether it's federal policy, state policy, local policies and investments. Business leaders and employers have an important and a very critical and influential voice. They are just a different dynamic and a different voice in the community. The more people we have from the private sector, from early childhood councils, from other organizations talking about this, the better. So you can advocate through organizations like EPIC, you can advocate with organizations like your Early Childhood Council. You've got lots of great partners here at United Way. So definitely think about how you can get involved and actually just serve as an advocate and champion. Put your assets to good use. Do you have land? Do you have buildings? Do you have extra workforce that could, have potentially work in early care and education? Think about the strengths that your own organization, your own entity has, and how those could be used for childcare. We actually have a number of employers right now across Colorado that are just saying, hey, I've got an extra building now. Could I put that to good use? And the answer is yes, you could. So we can help you with that. And of course, think about how you can invest in broader community efforts to increase access to quality, affordable childcare for the workforce. So maybe you can't offer a stipend for all of your employees. Maybe that's not something you can do right now or today, but you could work with United Way and the Early Childhood Council and help make scholarships available through your CSR program. So think about, what is something that you can do today as an employer to take a step towards this. Just a couple of notes, because I know I'm at time, right? Okay. I wanted to give everyone a look over policy efforts this year at the state capitol because there's a lot going on. We just yesterday had a bill that was sent to the governor, House Bill 22-1295. It is creating and funding and staffing a cabinet-level Department of Early Childhood here in Colorado, and it also fully implemented our universal preschool program, which was passed by Colorado voters via Proposition EE on the ballot. And so what universal preschool will do is it will give every parent in Colorado access to 10 free hours of preschool in their child's year before kindergarten. Those hours in this program has been specifically designed so that that preschool can be offered in a variety of settings. It could be offered in family child care homes, community preschools, public preschools, wherever the families need to take their children. And most importantly, that funding can also be blended and braided. So, of course, most working families need to have more than 10 hours of preschool. They need to have their child in full day care. And so the beauty of this is that with the structure that's been developed, ideally, this is this is the design, that this funding can be blended and braided with other types of funding, and that parents could just kind of tie those 10 hours into their full day of care. Secondly, we have another bill, 1010, Early Childhood Educator Tax Credit. This will create a refundable tax credit in Colorado for early childhood educators, up to $1,500 a year, depending on their credential level. So not a huge amount of money, but certainly something to incentivize, reward, and really hopefully retain early childhood educators in our system, because as universal preschool is implemented, we are going to need more facilities and more teachers. So we definitely want to attract and retain those professionals. We also have a bill that's creating a nonprofit childcare property tax exemption. So for any private or for-profit land or building owners, employers, whoever it might be, developers who are willing to lease space out to nonprofit childcare facilities, there will be a tax exemption that follows and applies to that space. We also have Colorado creating a public-private partnership authority and office so that they can actually inventory all of their state-owned facilities and assets, identify facilities that could be used as childcare, put $15 million towards renovating those facilities, and then work with local childcare operators to operate those programs for the community for childcare. We have a bill that is, we currently allow early childhood special districts to be created in Colorado. No one has taken advantage of that yet. Hopefully some community will. But this bill will actually allow early childhood special districts to cross various political subdivision boundaries and accept gifts, grants, and donations. And then lastly, we expect a bill to be introduced today or tomorrow in the Senate, which will invest about $50 million in childcare here in Colorado. It is coming from the Economic Recovery Task Force recommendations in the legislature. And it will, we anticipate it'll invest about $10 million in the employer-based facility grant program, $20 million in emerging and expanding capital improvement grants for childcare facilities, $15 million in workforce development for early care and education, and also some funding for informal care networks and caregivers, as well as family supports. So, lots going on at the Capitol. Yes. Oh, and Christina's got some more details too.
Thank you, Nicole. I wanted to share, Nicole made me think about this while she was talking. One, local policy related, so when we're talking about advocating for policy that might support this issue for us. The Early Childhood Council of Larimer County led a ballot initiative process last year where we proposed to put a 0.25% sales tax on our local ballot to fund early care and education. We did not ultimately make it to the ballot last year, but we'll be pursuing this policy again in 2023. So if you're interested and want to participate or throw your weight behind that advocacy, you're welcome to. And then one very quick humble brag. As an organization with the Early Childhood Council, we've grown significantly in the last couple of years. We've more than doubled our staff. And one of the things that I've noticed, especially in our most recent position postings, is that people are coming to us because that they hear we are a family-friendly environment. Literally, there are 2 top candidates for a position we have open right now. Both of them mentioned that the flexibility that we offer as an employer was one of the biggest draws for them. And so just want to flag that that can be an incredible way to bring new talent into your organization. We don't have trouble filling our positions, and we have incredible retention in my organization. So just wanted to brag a little bit because I'm proud of it. I'm going to hand it off to Yvonne to give us our introduction to our panelists.
Yes, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you. Those are the experts. There's the data. There's a video being made of this morning and all the slides. So we will get you the slides and the video. So I should have said that earlier. Some of you were taking copious notes, so sorry about that. So we've assembled a wonderful panel here today. And so I'm going to ask you all to come up as I say your names. So we have Teresa Roche, HR, Human Resources from the City of Fort Collins. So one of our favorite friends. So thank you, Teresa. Heather O'Hare, the Human Services Director for Larimer County, who's done some amazing work, so it'll be fun to hear about that. Farra Lanzer, Director in PR and Community Relations for Madwire. So super fun to have Farra here. Amanda Miller, the Director of Details for the Place Setting Company. And then, last but not least, Kevin Unger, President and CEO of the North Region of UCHealth. So Nicole and Christina will lead the question and panel discussion.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much to our panelists. Thanks for letting us put you on a stage and ask questions and hopefully have an engaging conversation. I think we just have one microphone, right, to share?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, so we're going to start with an easy question, which is, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, including your role and the size of your organization?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be on the panel today. My name is Amanda Miller, and I am the Director of Details and owner of the Place Setting Company. Additionally, I am a member of the United Way Public Policy Committee and the immediate past chair of Women Give. My company is celebrating 11 years, and 2 years ago, we brought on our first employee, so we're tiny. And then this spring, we have added 2 additional employees. So there are 4 of us at the Place Setting Company. And in our team, we have 6 kids. So my employees each have 2 children. So I consider that there's 4 employees and 6 little ones at home. So pass it along.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Heather O'Hare. I'm the director for the Larimer County Department of Human Services. Also a commission member on the state's Early Childhood Leadership Commission, ECLC. So the Department of Human Services is one of many Larimer County departments, but for my department in particular, we have 475 staff. Many of those are parents. Many of those parents also have young kids. And I myself have 3, and I have a 5-year-old. So being family friendly, thinking about childcare access is very personal and real to me, which then helps guide kind of my day-to-day work leading our very large department.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Teresa Roche, and I'm known as Kai's mom. Now 26, but as Kevin and I were talking earlier, you're a parent for life once you make that choice. So I have the really good fortune of working for the city of Fort Collins. I work in human resources. We have up to, at times, 2,500 different employees because we have a lot of seasonal employees to provide services to the community. And we have lots of people that are caregivers, which we love. And I think about Karen Burke, who's on the team with me. We really try to model what you said earlier about promoting when people need to leave or come late. In fact, we kind of formed that Abby Wambach, go where the ball's at. Somebody needs to leave, we go and surround them, even if it's virtually.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Farra Lanzer. I'm the Director of PR and Community Relations for Madwire. I'm also the co-chair of Women Give and an Empowerment Council member for the Women's Foundation of Colorado, both organizations which everything we've talked about today is a huge part of. So I am not a mom at this point in my life, but this issue is very important to me. Madwire has just about 600 employees. We're an extremely young workforce, and we're starting to see not all, but a very large portion of our employees have children. So we are in the stage at Madwire where most of our employees are dealing with the infant care situation. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for having me as well. My name is Kevin Unger. I'm the president and CEO of the Northern Region for UCHealth, which includes Medical Center of the Rockies, Poudre Valley Hospital, the Greeley facility, as well as we have a hospital up in Steamboat called Yampa Valley. And so Christina was very kind in saying I'm the token male up here on the panel, and I appreciate that. And I'm acutely aware, specifically through the pandemic, just the need and the realities of keeping a viable workforce, just because of the child care issue is big, specifically in the healthcare industry. And so we are grappling with staffing challenges continually. And while it's been predominantly kind of a nice to have, I think it's moving to a must have, specifically within the healthcare industry. And I think those that kind of move quickest will be the winners in the long term because the challenges are acute at this moment. So.
Thank you all. Thanks for calling me out on that, Kevin. My next question for you all is, what impacts have you seen as an employer related to childcare access for your staff? Does it have impact on recruitment and retention? And do you conduct exit surveys to measure that in any way? So does someone want to just start at Amanda, or we want to start somewhere else? Okay. There you go. Teresa, I'm going to pass that. Thank you.
As the tiny company on the panel, we can be the small example of, we haven't lost any employees, so I haven't had to do any exit interviews, which I'm thankful for. But I would say childcare needs come up regularly, especially during the pandemic, and especially with kiddos being home for school. So everything from being at dance class or an outbreak in a pre-K room where kids had to be home for weeks, even when it felt like the pandemic was kind of wrapping up, it was still very real. So dealing with kids as a part of our work environment has been very regular, I would say, for the last 2.5, 3 years. We are, looking at how to be the most flexible that we can. One of our employees actually had to move to South Dakota, so we have one full-time remote employee on our tiny team. So I think I answered the question. We'll want to pass straight down the line.
So I would agree the childcare challenges have been very significant. Some of the cultural shifts we've made have made a huge difference. We do a lot of exit interviews for our staff. Most of them are generally recent college grads when they join our team. And so then we are seeing them leave a couple of years later when they decide to have a family, decide to make different personal choices. So we do exit interviews with every single one of them, childcare and housing, usually together, but childcare in particular, and not necessarily when they have their first child, but it's usually the second or the third child, when just trying to cobble together childcare or afford it no longer becomes feasible, and they're doing that cost-benefit analysis that they're paying more in childcare for 2 or 3 kids than they're actually making. And so we do lose a significant number of staff. But the flexible work schedules, and we are actually moving forward. We've implemented a hybrid work environment requirement. So all of our staff are required to work part of the week in the office, part of the work remotely. We do have a handful of staff that work 100% remote, and we've really pushed our county risk department to actually establish insurance plans across multiple states so that we can actually have the workers' comp insurance across state lines. That was a significant barrier, but we do have, I think out of the 50 states, there's only 5 that our staff cannot work in. So while we don't have a lot of staff in, the vast majority of the size of our department that work 100% out of state, just having the flexibility of being able to maybe go and visit if they're caring for older parents, go and visit and spend time caring for their parents while also being able to work out of state has made a huge difference.
So I want to share a couple of things to kind of give you a mind and heart meld with me. First thing I want to say is anything any of us are doing, I really believe are Band-Aids to a huge societal issue in our country, as Nicole and Christina pointed out. And I just want to acknowledge that. So I'll share some of the things that we're doing that I feel delighted by, and yet it's still not enough. The other thing I want to tell you is that the pandemic was the hugest disruptor that I've experienced in my life. And we decided early on to do 2 things as a city team. First, we said, we don't know where this is going, but what do we want to be the story that is told at the end? And that guided us with some principles that we held as our North Star. We were very conscious of the fact that we're one of the largest employers in the county, and we know that talent is how we are able to provide all the services to the community that our taxpayers and those that live here and visit come to expect. That disruption, I actually will tell you, in a weird way, I'm grateful for. And I never would say I want the pandemic, but I think it cracked us all open to see some things that we've all known, but we can't turn our face from anymore. One of the things that happened is we normalized what it meant to be human. One of the other things that we normalized was the amazing mental stress, burnout, emotional exhaustion, particularly for those that care for others. And we talk about caregivers. And when we talk about being family friendly, we actually say life friendly, just so that can be more inclusive. But obviously, as you guys pointed out, for women in particular, this has been a huge impact. The one thing I'll say, because I just don't want to list all the things that we're doing, but there's actually 2 things I'll mention. Early in the pandemic, the then city manager asked me, well, what do you think the employees would want us to do? And I think my best answer during the whole pandemic is, I don't know, let's ask. We invited our employees to activate their agency to tell us what they were thinking. We first did it for the cost reduction scenarios we were looking for, which we ended up not having to do to the degree that we thought we were. We did a teleworking survey, and that's when we first started hearing some of the deeper caregiving issues that people were finding. And then we did a child care survey last fall. We've been working with EPIC, which was one of the smartest things we did, thanks to the county starting that whole partnership. So the whole thought of hearing from our employees is something that we have done, which is activating their agency. And if we're going to take the time to do that, we do our best to try and respond to what they're telling us. And I'll tell you, the stories you read, they're painful, to see what people are going through. The other thing that started before the pandemic, and it just took off like a wild storm, is we started employee resource groups, and we have 4. And the one that's now called Caregivers Alliance started as the single parents subcommittee of the Women Focus, which was our employee resource group. Wonderful woman that leads this, Catherine Bailey, and we also have another co-lead that's at the Poudre Fire Authority. I said to them, you don't have to be a subcommittee anymore. Why don't you become an employee resource group, which provides a certain amount of financial support and just executive sponsorship. And the Caregivers Alliance, which is what it's now called, switched from single parent because we asked them would they be open to understanding caregiving is a broader issue than just single parents. And they have been a tremendous resource for us. This month they're hosting some weekly check-ins to talk about some topics that impact them. So when you talk about do we ask our employees, we shouldn't wait for the exit interview. And I think we've tried to bring that home in the city. Thank you.
At Madwire, when COVID happened, we made a huge switch from being fully in person. That was like a huge part of our culture. It was 7 to 4, Monday through Friday. That was what we did. If you couldn't make that work, you didn't work at Madwire. When COVID happened, very early on, we made the decision to switch to what we call Madwire Life policy. And it was decided that we would never go back to requiring people to be in the office Monday through Friday, 7 to 4. So now all of our employees can work wherever they want, whenever they want. As long as they're communicating with their leaders what's going on with their schedules and they're getting their work done, it's totally fine with us. We have many, many people who do have kids at home. It's challenging, but they make it work, but we're understanding of that now. So we made a major shift when COVID happened. And like I said, we don't plan to go back to requiring people to be in the office. Another, maybe not super unique, but might be a little unique to us is that many of our positions are entry level. So we're hiring kids right out of college. These are kids who typically don't have a family yet, but what we're seeing now is now that Madwire is 12 years old, a mass amount of our employees are starting to have children. And so we're just now dealing with this issue that was never an issue before. Our director of HR is sitting back there, and I asked her today, I said, in the exit interviews, has anything come up like this? And the answer was no. Childcare specifically has not, but one thing that has is the flexibility piece of what Madwire now offers, and that's been huge for people. We are also in the very, very, very early stages of exploring an on-site childcare facility, which is part of the reason we're here today. We wanted to learn more. We surveyed our team last week, and we're compiling those survey results this week, and we'll start that process.
Well, it's hard to follow all of that, but yeah, it's impossible. I realized I didn't do a very good job of explaining what UCHealth is, and so we are across the state, about 24,000 employees, of which about 9,000 are here in northern Colorado, predominantly female-based organization. Our caregivers are predominantly female, 24/7 operation, as you would expect from the hospital side. And so we, during the pandemic, we certainly were more flexible with working at home, but it was challenging because we need people at the bedside. And so we are truly competing with that work at home philosophy in an environment where our caregivers were also teachers and doing everything that they could just to kind of keep the wheels on the bus, not only at home, but also within the industry. And so we are seeing anybody within that 5 years of retirement taking that opportunity, and we need to really figure out the child care piece. We do have on-site child care up in Yampa, and so Nicole's presentation where she talked about the higher cost of living and the need to have child care there. We have a grandkids program is what it's called. 37 kids can be seen at the on-site child care facility there, and it's a model that we're working on kind of disseminating throughout the rest of the organization. We have always, made connections to daycare centers throughout the community, and we did provide backup childcare when needed, but that program became incredibly difficult to administer. One thing that we did do during the pandemic that was quite interesting is we had an internal communication tool called Yammer that actually not only were there a need for childcare and tutoring, but there were college students at home that traditionally were not at home because the universities weren't open. And so we provided a platform to connect people that needed daycare with families that had college students at home or high school students at home that had the opportunity to provide the tutoring or daycare as well. But we're going to have to just continue to kind of figure this out. What we are finding is that near-site daycare doesn't work as well as on-site. So if you have an infant, it's nice to be able to just be in the same building or very close, because even if it's a slight walk, that is a barrier to making it successful as well. And what we're trying to figure out is with major sites at MCR and Poudre Valley and Greeley, do we have the ability and the capacity within the hospitals, which we traditionally do not, to actually offer this. And so those are kind of the things we're grappling with. We're currently in the process of what's called it's a very sexy term we put on this, but it's called a benefits modernization survey, where we're actually, we launched it in February, where we're asking what is important to you as an employee and what can we do to meet your needs. And so we have not received the results back from that survey, but I anticipate that daycare will be right at the top of the list. And we're seeing the same phenomena as you have additional children that need daycare at $12,000 a year. You multiply that, people are doing the cost-benefit analysis and saying, it doesn't make sense for me to work because the money that I'm making is going towards childcare. So there is an incredible amount of talent on the sidelines right now that we need to activate and figure out how to make that work.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for those great strategies and insights into your own organizations. For those of you who have implemented some strategies already and started to perhaps see the outcomes associated with those, can you share more about either the financial or the productivity benefits that you've noticed with those strategies for your own organizations?
Thank you. So I'll share a few of the things that I think are fun that we're doing, again, with our small company. We have assigned for every project a backup person, knowing that things can always come up. So our team is ready to kind of infill if there's any emergencies with kids and schedules and all the things that can happen. One thing I do is when we do holiday bonuses, I actually do a gift for the kids too. Again, recognizing that it's the whole family that's part of the team. And that's a gift from the company, and I think it's been really well received and really fun. We keep a bin of fun things at the office, so games and toys and colors, so that if there is a need to bring a kiddo to the office, even if it's just for a few hours, there's ways to stay active and feel engaged rather than just kind of sitting in the corner on an iPhone. One fun example I want to share with Nikki working out of South Dakota, we have spent the last few years really only on Zoom, and her daughter thinks it's tons of fun to pop in and say hello on Zoom. So rather than feeling like that was a disruption, we've really embraced it. I actually keep a coloring, it's an instructional book, how to color fun things, or draw more than color. So over the last few years, I've taught Nora through Zoom how to color a llama or draw a llama or draw a castle. And I think she thinks I'm like a drawing master. I finally broke it to her that I have this coloring manual at my ready. But Nikki will even ask sometimes, she'll say that Nora would really love to do a coloring moment. And we do call it a moment because we really only break from work for 3 or 4 minutes to engage Nora and make her feel part of that Zoom meeting, which has been a super fun thing even for me. So those are a few tangible things. Like others have shared, we offer full virtual opportunity. All of our work is web-based. We do have an office in downtown Fort Collins, and I have actually come to realize that that is as valuable as being able to work from home. I think the women that work for me really value being able to be downtown and in a professional outfit and not have little ones around their feet for the day. And so we have committed to keeping that workplace, that office as an option. So those are a few things we're doing as a smaller team.
Thank you. So we have, I would say, a handful of strategies that we've implemented. I'm very thankful we have phenomenal leadership at the county and great human resource partners with our county department as well, that as we've looked at our shift to hybrid work that I talked about. So requiring that across the board, similar to UCHealth, very few of our positions can be done 100% remote because we serve the community, we serve the public. So finding that balance has been really crucial, but it's also allowed us to decrease our facility size, which has then allowed us to utilize those resources in very different ways. So we've utilized our cost savings from being able to decrease our office space to then make sure that staff have the equipment at home that they need to be productive. So we issued duplicate equipment to all of our staff so that they had double monitors and everything that they needed at home, just like they do at their desk. We switched out all of our desktops to laptops so that they really could just plug in when they get to the office and be productive. But we also made a very significant shift. We got rid of all of our desk phones, and now we issue county-issued cell phones to everyone. Just those little tweaks has made huge impacts in staff being productive when they're at home. But I would say the tool that I am most excited about, and I've shared a little bit of this with Christina, it's called Sigbee. So on the county-issued cell phone, it's an app, so they download the app. And what it does is it allows staff to what we call just check in. So it's a well-being app, and it asks 5 to 6 questions. You can check in as much as you want. We try to encourage staff to check in once a day, and it asks questions that are backed in research around wellness, resilience, job confidence, and connectedness to their team. And what we are seeing is phenomenal information across different staff groups. Actually, our young parents struggle the most with resilience and job confidence because they're juggling as much as they are. So it's just helped to provide that well-being data for staff. So it goes, the data in the app goes directly to their supervisor, and there's always an open-ended question at the end that's, they're fun questions. It's not driven by productivity. It's not driven by work performance at all. It's things like, if you could rate how you're doing today like a weather forecast, would it be cloudy with a chance of rain? Would it be a hurricane? Or are you sitting on the beach? So it's just thinking about their well-being in a different way. And what we've heard from staff is that it allows them to share different information with their supervisor when they're doing really well or on days when they're really struggling. But it also has allowed them to set a different intention for the day. It encourages them to just take a couple of minutes at the beginning of the day and really think about how they're doing and what do they need from their supervisor, what do they need from their team, to then be able to be productive before they just jump in and start with work. And then the aggregate information comes to myself and our leadership team where we can see those patterns over time. Within some of our programs where the work volume is significant at the beginning of the month, those teams really struggle. And so we're able to then wrap around other strategies to really help just bolster the staff as people first and foremost, and make sure that they have what they need to be successful. The other piece I would say that has been a really significant change is supporting supervisors very differently. Our supervisors have had to grow and learn a lot over the last couple of years because supporting a hybrid workforce is very different. Prior to COVID, working remote was actually a perk, but you had to justify to your supervisor that you could do it one day a month and that you could still get your work done and be successful. You had to make an argument that you could still get your work done. And then in a matter of 72 hours, everybody had to be remote and we didn't have any other options. And so helping supervisors think about how they support staff differently, how we can still get the work done, but how we also support the teams to be able to just pay closer attention to how they're doing as individuals has been significant. And I would say that what we're seeing out of the tool as well in larger groups is just the mental health needs around staff in general, regardless of what their family dynamics look like. And so we've partnered with Human Resources to think about how can we support staff differently. We've started Resilience Alliance groups, is what we call them, where we contract with clinicians in the community to come in and help us co-lead groups with staff to think about self-care, think about resilience. So it's really just shifted our culture and turned it on its head. And for the first time, so I've been with the county for 7 years. I have, out of 475 positions, I have 2 vacancies. 2. Prior to COVID, going into COVID, I had 40% vacancies and turnover at 2 years. So it's like Christina shared with her experience, we're not struggling to fill positions. We actually have a wait list for some of our positions, and we're recruiting staff from, a lot of them actually from Wyoming, and a lot of them from neighboring counties, because the flexibility and the additional tools to think about people as people seems to be making a very significant and quick change.
Would the county be willing to share some of those wait lists with us at the city? That was great. I love that. Well, one of the first strategies I would say is hiring Karen Burke shortly before the pandemic, because having somebody on your team that has such a human-centered focus makes a huge difference. The other question my team and I asked at the beginning of the pandemic was, how are we going to love our employees and how are we going to love them well? And that's been kind of our test. I can't tell you that every employee has felt that love equally because it's been challenging. So I'm just going to hit a couple of things. We actually had backup emergency care that we provided through an organization here locally long before I came to the city. And we stretched that to the max during the pandemic. We actually provided 100% subsidy. We got a wonderful grant from Broadcom to help us pay for that, particularly for our employees that had to be on site. Kevin, similar to you, different than you, we have a mixed population. Bus operators can't work remotely. Our police officers can't work remotely. Our firefighters can't work remotely. Our utility workers can't work remotely. So one of the things we are doing is we've launched a huge effort. It started last year called the Future of Work, because we wanted to really learn from what we'd experienced. And this new normal, none of us know what the end is, but we wanted to learn and experiment. So actually coming later this month, we have some new policies that we're going to be putting out there. And one of the things we worked very hard on is, how do you provide fairness even if it's not the same? So our on-site employees said to us, we don't want to work remotely. It's great that our colleagues do, but we don't feel we have the same flexibility to leave at noon to maybe go check on your child or take somebody to the doctor's office. So that's been one of our unique challenges, and we're trying to lean into it, and we'll see if what we're doing, is going to work. The last thing I'll just share is, I mentioned we worked with Epic. Thanks to the county, your HR director said, Teresa, do you want to consider forming a child care center near site or on site? And I said, wow, I don't know how you're going to do that, but sure, I'm interested. But what we said is, we didn't know what our employees wanted. So thanks to Epic, we did a child care benefit exploration to find out what their needs were. And overwhelmingly, the biggest percent of our employees want home-based high-quality care. So us doing a near-site or on-site was not going to be feasible. And frankly, as MIMS knows, it's really important to us in the city. Shannon's on the team that takes care of this. We love to take care of our people, but we are in an ecology here, and we need to make sure that there's affordable, accessible childcare for the community. So we have an inside-out, outside-in philosophy, and I'm very blessed to have many colleagues that Karen and I work with that look at the external, and then we're looking at the internal. So I think I'm going to close there to make sure that my wonderful colleagues up here get a chance to talk.
Thanks. At Madwire, as I've already said, we switched to this flexible working schedule. I would say we have maybe on a good day 10% of our whole workforce in the office, but it is available to people. One thing that we've really strived to work on as we mostly are remote is building connection, because that can be a little bit more difficult in a remote environment than obviously being in the office in person with people. And we really believe that building connection is extremely important. So we've created, I won't go fully into it, but we've created a number of ways in which our employees can build connection. Another thing that we've done to make it easier on our leadership team in this hybrid workforce, shortly after COVID began, we made our individual teams much smaller. So each leader has a much smaller team to manage. They can become closer to their teams. We really want our leaders to be able to form personal relationships with their team members, so that these people are comfortable going to their leaders and saying, my kid is homesick, they can't go to daycare, I'm going to work, but it's going to be hit or miss for me today, and that's fine. And so by creating these smaller teams, we've really allowed more interpersonal connection to happen within the teams, which has been really good for us.
And I don't even remember what the question was, but I'll add a few comments. Which during the pandemic, we certainly did see an increased need for behavioral health services, not only for our employees, but the community in general, which affects our employees. And so a lot of organizational development needs. We have psychiatrists and psychologists that have been really helping with kind of resilience training, and with our leadership team giving us tools so that we can see kind of the signs of burnout or trouble ahead. And so we've been working very hard there. We offer flexible scheduling, and the benefit of being a 24/7 operation is that you can kind of choose when you would like to work. We have developed an internal float pool just to provide for that flexibility. So we had a lot of sick calls or daycare challenges, or you name it, and with that float pool, we were able to kind of plug the holes and make sure that we were staffed in the areas that we needed staffing. We also offer a category called PRN, which basically you just pick up shifts when it's convenient for you. So we put it out and say, we need these shifts covered. Is there any interest in doing that? And really the only requirement is that you pick up 2 shifts a month, and you can maintain that PRN status, which really has helped us as well. But we are not as fortunate. We do have some openings. We've been very successful at hiring. Northern Colorado is a wonderful place to recruit to. I am also have some responsibilities with some facilities in Wyoming and Nebraska, which are a little more rural. And we are not challenged to the extent that they are in terms of getting people to come here. We've got, the mountains and a great quality of life, but between the cost of living, the cost of daycare, it's getting more and more difficult to recruit. We compete directly with ambulatory surgery centers. It seems like our operating rooms and OR nurses and techs are very hard to recruit at this moment. We have some challenges with some mixed units where people are taking care of ortho and neuro patients. Traditionally, nurses like to pick one or the other, and so we're going to have to kind of peel that onion and figure out how to do that. But it is like none other. We couldn't wait to kind of see our COVID patient population decrease, but we had no idea what we'd be facing when we came out. And I would anticipate that our labor challenges are will be there for the rest of my career, just because healthcare is a tough place to be. And it's easier, when we're competing with, $18, $20 an hour positions at McDonald's and some of the other areas, retail, where you're not having to physically put yourself in challenging positions. We really are going to have to figure out what this looks like as we go forward. Another big issue for us, and I'm sorry to dominate the conversation, is that nursing students, you can make more money being a floor nurse than being an instructor. And so while there is a large demand for students wanting to go into the profession, we don't have enough people to train them. And so we're looking at different ways that we can do that as well. But certainly daycare is front and center of our challenges as we sit today.
Thank you, everyone. We are out of time, so we had more questions for our panelists, but they shared some incredible information. Just want to say thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists today? All of the work that you're doing to support your employees impacts the rest of our community, as you know. I mean, collectively, there are thousands of employees that are under the various structures that these people represent. So very grateful for your forward-thinking attitude towards providing family-friendly environments and for your time in coming today. Thank you all for coming. We did tape this, as Yvonne shared, and we'll share it out with everyone that attended and likely post it on the Chamber website and the Early Childhood Council website. So please share it out. If you have any additional resources that you need related to family-friendly environments, you want a little bit of TA or support in changing policies or practices within your own organization, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Early Childhood Council. That's what we're here for, amongst many other things. And we want to hear from you. So thank you again. So appreciate all of you and your partnership and your willingness to come today. And have a great day.